Even men at the top of their game find themselves wanting more from life. Whether it's more meaning, unshakable confidence, a bigger impact, more money, deeper love, a hotter sex life, or a powerful legacy. Find out how good your life can be on this episode of Man Alive. Also, as I've supported men in their love and work lives for 15 years now, many men ask for the right words to say to be more successful, attractive, and desirable. But I found it's not so simple as giving scripts or lines because every man is different. So giving words or scripts would be like giving a tall, thin man a shorter, wider man's pants, or vice versa. The words have to make sense for you and your personality, and there's so much happening beneath the surface that people are responding to. If you're interested in how to become a better lover and leader in your own unique way, go to shanajamescoaching.com/quiz, or you can text ALIVE to 44144. It only takes a couple minutes and you'll start to get an idea of how you can be both more respected and desired. After you fill it out, we can schedule a time to review your quiz and talk about your specific challenges and desires. So again, go to either shanajamescoaching.com/quiz or text ALIVE to 44144. That's ALIVE to 44144. Enjoy this episode of Man Alive. Hello and welcome to this episode of Man Alive. I'm your host, Shana James, and excited to be here today to talk about self-sabotage. Maybe I shouldn't say I'm excited to talk about self-sabotage, but what I'm excited about is to start to understand, for you to start to understand, and in myself as well, how we sabotage ourselves, how we can avoid it, what to do when we recognize that it's happening. And I'm here today with performance coach Mo Abbasi. Welcome, Mo.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you too. And Mo has done some deep diving into therapy and shadow work and silent meditation and all the things that I know and love as well. So I commend you. I know that it came from experiencing a lot of pain in life, and maybe you could just give us a little glimpse into how you got into all of this.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. It came from a lot of pain in my life. I grew up in a household where I dealt with a lot of physical and mental and emotional abuse.
Yeah.
I was pretty much bullied all years of my
Oh,
school years.
I'm so sorry.
And um, because of all of these experiences, it was pretty much in the back of my head all the time, but I tried to distract myself with things like building a business and making a ton of money. And when I realized that money only solves money problems,
Yeah.
I couldn't ignore it any longer. And
Yeah.
so I took a 2 year kind of hiatus and I went pretty much all over the world, did every form of therapy that I could, did
Wow.
crazy spiritual retreats and silent meditation retreats to really just figure out what was going on in my human mind that was
Yeah.
causing me to self-sabotage and do all of these things with my finances and habits that were destructive and weren't serving me, and how you can actually overcome it.
That's really powerful. And it takes a lot. I mean, I think I did a journey around the world when I was 21 or 22, and Thailand and Nepal and India, right? It's like I was suffering as well in that time, and we just really wanted to understand, where is this suffering coming from, and is this how it has to be? And so I have a lot of respect and admiration for you for diving into the deep end.
Thanks. Yeah, it was a long journey. It was fun. um Lots of pain along the way, but
Yeah.
definitely a lot of healing, as well, as I'm sure you've experienced yourself. um yeah, it wasn't so much that I wanted to travel. I just wanted to figure out like this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very analytical by nature, so I want to know the science behind things. Like I want to know the science behind like what's going on in my brain and what synapses are connecting and what things are
Yeah.
causing my brain to act out in these ways, and what's the actual solution behind it. Because I up until that point I had read tons of books on
Mm-hmm.
habits
Mm-hmm.
and habit formation and how you can become a better person and self-improvement and Tony Robbins and stuff like that.
Yep.
And it seemed that either these books were very surface level, like, just set up goals and just go after your goals,
Yeah.
or they were a lot of science stuff behind it, but not so much the solution in the books. And
Yes.
so I wanted the solutions. I wanted to figure out, what do I do step by step to overcome this?
I love that. And it's so powerful because there are people who, some people can just listen to this, somebody telling them, okay, here, set up these goals. But most of my clients, if we say, hey, go accomplish these things, there will be some reason or other why they're not going to do that, right? They haven't
Right.
done it up until this point, and they're not going to do it unless there's some deeper unearthing or right, understanding of what's going on down there.
Yeah. A deep why.
Yes. Yes, that makes sense. Okay, so can you tell us a little bit about self-sabotage and what you like how would you first of all define self-sabotage?
That's a great question. Self-sabotage to me is doing things that are not in alignment with your deepest values and moral compass.
I like that.
So you know that you should be doing something else, but you're doing the complete opposite or you're not doing it. And so
Uh-huh.
you're technically sabotaging your ideal self from actually being actualized, from
Wow.
doing the thing that's supposed to be done. Um, and of course, we can get into like the science behind why this happens and so on and so forth. But that to me is the biggest thing is like, you value something and you know something is in alignment with your own moral compass,
Mhm.
but you're just not living by
But
it.
you're not doing it, right? And you said something you should be doing, and I imagine it's not a should based on someone else's language or expectations, but something would be healthy for you or would create more success or more love or any of those things.
Exactly. Yeah. And the easiest way to kind of dictate whether you are self-sabotaging is after you do something, or let's say you don't do something, do you feel the feelings of shame and guilt?
Mm.
And usually, if you're feeling either shameful or guilty, then you know that you're actually self sabotaging because you weren't in alignment with your own values. And therefore, that's why you're feeling the feelings of emotions of shame and guilt.
Got it. And I
Yeah,
would imagine there's a lot of conflict in there too when our values don't always align with the people who raised us or the culture we live in. And then that makes it that much more complicated.
exactly. You have two sets of values now. You have values that you're trying to go toward and values that you're trying to get away from. And sometimes these aren't um, going to be coinciding with each other. So one of your values could be that you want a relationship, your top going toward value, but your top going away value could be that you're trying to avoid rejection.
Uh huh.
And so even if you want a relationship, but you're trying to avoid rejection, then you're probably not going to do the thing to get the relationship in the
Oh,
first
this
place,
is,
or it's going to be
yeah.
inconsistent.
Yeah. Okay. This is a really good example because a lot of my clients struggle with that fear of rejection. And so I like that you actually phrased it as a value, right? The going away from value. Is that what you said?
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Okay. So can we use this example to keep exploring this?
Sure. Yeah, we can dive deep into it. Yeah,
Okay.
it's just you have two sets of values. One is trying to go towards a desirable situation, and one is trying to get away from an undesirable one. And
Right.
usually, if those two values are, um, like for this example, you're trying to go towards a relationship, but you avoid rejection, we're most likely going to go with our going away value first rather than the
Interesting.
desirable value.
Okay.
And this is there's a good book called Anxious by Stephen Ledoux, I think is the author, and he talks about this. We basically have seven centers in our brain that's dictated towards pain, fear, and anxiety, and only one center in our brain that's dictated towards pleasure.
Wow.
And so what that means is we're most likely going to play to not lose rather than playing to win.
Oh,
But
uh-huh.
also that one center of pleasure is also very strong. So we can actually use this, in the future. But point being is that we try to avoid a lot of pain rather than going towards the pleasure.
Yeah. Okay. So when you're working with clients who are attempting to avoid rejection, whether it's in a love relationship or some other thing, it might be asking for a promotion or it might be, right, whatever the risk is, how do you start helping them unravel this self-sabotage?
Yeah. Well, self-sabotage is, you have the tactical aspects of things. So like for example, if you have any addictive behaviors, let's say you scroll on social media too long, right? Or you smoke a little bit or drink a little bit more than you should, right? Usually the tactical aspects is you need a most self-sabotaging behaviors, the reason why they show up is one, because you're bored and your
Uh-huh.
life isn't that exciting.
Uh-huh.
And so you just need something to excite you.
Okay.
Or two, you're in such a low energy depressive state that
Yep.
you need a sense of boost, just a few seconds where you feel good through something.
Yep.
And so we have to make life exciting and we have to do things that make us feel good, right?
Yeah.
Which is what I call the 7 basics of energy. A lot of
Okay.
people come to me and they ask for like meditations and fancy tactics and how do we dive deep into the inner wounds and all this stuff. It's like, well, before we do that, are you getting enough sleep and are you sleeping on time and waking up at the same time?
Mm-hmm.
Are you getting sunlight in the morning? Are you drinking enough water? Are you going on walks, getting some fresh air? Are you exercising? Are you eating whole foods, not eating a ton of sugar and carbs and all this stuff? And are you connecting with other people, your loved ones?
Mm-hmm.
Let's
These are
get
the
the
7 basics.
7 basics.
Okay.
If we can get these 7 basics first in order,
Yep.
half of your self-sabotaging problems is going to go away because now you're not bored. Your life is more fun. It's fulfilling. And you're doing things that actually provide you with high
With more
energy.
energy, high energy. Uh-huh.
Exactly.
Okay. So there is like, the structured aspect of this in order to get the sleep and eat the food and do all the things. You've got to really create a structure for yourself, which I imagine some people might self-sabotage again. So if we go back to the rejection, if you're a rejection example, right? One of the things that someone who wants a relationship but is afraid of rejection might not do is, I don't know, have those conversations, right? Or so how does that work with those basics?
That's a great question. So we have to get the basics in order. We have to schedule them. We have to structure them. But sabotage within the basics comes up.
Yeah.
And so this is where we go into the deeper work. Most of the time when people are self-sabotaging, I've dealt with this pretty much my entire life. I've always had addictions just come up, whether it was addictions through sex, whether it was addictions through pornography, whether it was addictions to weed, alcohol, like things that were just constantly coming up where things would be going good in my life and I would just pull myself back down.
Yep.
And so this usually comes because there's a part of your brain called the amygdala,
Mm-hmm.
and it stores emotional memory. And
Mm-hmm.
this is usually from the past in your life. So, especially when you were, let's say, 5 years old, 4 years old, and you went through some traumatic experiences. Now, these don't have to be intense traumas, right? Such as sexual abuse and so on and so forth, but it could include those things. Regardless, if you've had some traumas that has been stored as emotional memory in your amygdala, what's going to happen is here you are in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and you're trying to go through life doing these things that are good for you, but you still have feelings of anxiety in the back of your head. You still
Yep.
have feelings of fear in the back of your head. You still have all of these emotions that are stored.
Yeah.
And so that 5-year-old part of you is trying to self-soothe. That's all it's trying to do. So when you smoke too much, drink too much, go on Netflix binges, eat too much food, all of these things that go against those 7 basics of high energy. All it is
Those are
there's
self-soothing behaviors.
it's just self-soothing behaviors. So you're feeling something subconsciously and you're trying to immediately get rid of it by doing that. And I always tell people, like, if you go 7 days, social media is a great one too. 7 days, cut social media out. People realize within those 7 days how addicted they are to social media, how much they use it to get rid of emotions of boredom, anger, resentment, frustration, irritation, sadness, depression, loneliness, all of these emotions that are stored in your amygdala.
Yeah.
So the second part of this is learning how to have those inner child talks with that 5-year-old part of yourself.
Right. And how to feel those things that you're avoiding. Because then, if you take that addiction away, there they are.
Exactly. Those emotions are going to come up.
Yep.
So how do we feel them? How do we observe them? How do we allow ourselves to go through that emotion without trying to reject it or push it away? Because oftentimes we try to reject a certain emotion because we've been told not to feel it, right?
Right.
Especially like if we were talking about men, like they're told, man up, don't cry,
Yep.
don't do all of these things. So now there's an emotion that feels uncomfortable. And instead of you allowing yourself to feel it,
Yep.
you go, I can't do this. I
No
got to
way.
self-soothe.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And so the second part of it is allowing yourself to actually feel the emotions. Sit 5-10 minutes without doing anything and see what emotions come up
Yep.
and sit with those emotions. Are you bored? Are you angry? Are you sad? And go through the cycle of that.
Yeah. It's so interesting too, right? As I've had a, mindfulness or meditation spiritual practice over the years. And it's amazing how challenging it can be to just witness, right? And to not get taken on the ride and all the stories and right? The feelings are connected to the stories of what this means. And I do find that, when my clients just allow ourselves to come back into this moment and feel what's here, sometimes it can feel like we're going to die or, everything's going to fall apart, but it usually doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah. Most of the time if anything, it's needed. It's like a
It's like a release valve or a
exactly.
depressurizes the balloon.
I love that you said that because I was talking to I think it's Dr. Michael Pariser. He's the author of No More Mr. Nice Guy Workbook.
Hmm.
And he was talking about what most men do is like you have two tea kettles, right? And
Yeah.
they're both filled with milk. One of them is a see-through tea kettle and one of them isn't. The one that's see-through, the moment you see the milk frothing up, you can
Yeah.
take it off
Yeah.
and you can release whatever, the steam, and allow it to go back down. But most people, they don't allow themselves to see the emotion. And so the milk just blows over and it starts to pour out. And this is the same thing with emotions. If you don't allow yourself to feel it, that's when you have these spurts of either bad, addictive, destructive habits. All of a sudden, you go shopping and spend way too much, or you get angry at a certain person, family member, and it all just kind of comes out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So the transparency or the seeing inside the container in this case is actually allowing yourself to be aware that you're having feelings instead of stuffing them until that last moment when, it's all it's all blowing over.
Exactly. And I teach a very specific journaling process where you sit down and you write down, okay, what's the situation?
Mm-hmm.
Right? The situation is I want to right now watch a bunch of Netflix. I feel uncomfortable. I feel bored.
Yeah.
Then you write down the thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
So, what are the thoughts that are coming up and actually label those thoughts, put a name to those thoughts because if you want to become the observer, you have to step outside of it.
Yeah.
And so, sit down and write down the situation, write down the thoughts behind it. So, what are the thoughts that are coming up?
And
And
how would
then
you
write
label the thoughts? Just like what they
anything.
are or something about them?
Yeah, you can name them as what they are, something about them. You can name them something funny,
Mm.
right? So like you can name some of your thoughts the Joker, right? Like
Uh-huh.
whatever. It
Yeah.
just all we're doing is we're just labeling it so that we can remove you from it, right?
Right.
So we
Right.
can
It can be
remove that
separate from you. I have I think the last one I was doing with someone was like pushy Paul. Like you've got this part,
yeah.
it's super pushy inside of you and he really wants to get things done and he's not going to stop at anything. And yeah.
Exactly. That's like a perfect example. Pushy Paul, right? You can name it Pushy Paul and then write down the thoughts. And then after you write down the thoughts, what are the emotions?
Mm-hmm.
So, what are you feeling? Raw emotions right now. I feel frustrated. I feel angry. I feel whatever the emotion is behind it.
Yep.
And then write down the behavior. So, what are you trying to do in this moment
Mm-hmm.
to self soothe that you shouldn't be doing?
Mm-hmm.
And so just doing that allows you to remove yourself from being inside of the situation. And now you can observe it and see things a little bit more clearly,
Yeah.
which now you don't have to self-soothe as much. And again, another example is like, imagine if you're about to do laundry, you
Mm-hmm.
throw all the clothes in there, but you also throw yourself in the laundry and you're spinning with the clothes.
Wow. Okay.
This is the same thing as your thoughts. Like
Yeah.
most people are spinning with their thoughts.
That's a great way to describe that, right? You're on the ride of your thoughts as opposed to putting your thoughts over there in the laundry,
Exactly.
witnessing them.
Exactly. So get outside of the laundry, remove yourself from the laundry, and look at the laundry happening. Don't
Yep.
be inside of it.
Don't be in it.
Um, and
Okay.
that itself is like the inner portion aspect.
I love this. All right. So for our guy or, someone of any gender who is afraid of rejection and also wants a relationship,
Mhm.
how does he get outside the laundry?
Yeah. So, of course, you have your towards values. You have to set the tactical aspects of your life. It's like, okay, you know what? Today I want to approach and talk to 10 people,
Mhm.
right? So, setting goals is super important for understanding where you want to go. But to get rid of those away values of rejection, the goal of getting away from rejection, actually the value that you're moving towards.
Mm.
So, it's like, my goal this week is to talk to 10 people and get it, allow myself to get rejected by them.
Okay.
And so we're removing this idea of like, I don't want to experience this anymore to
Yeah.
I have to experience this.
Yes.
And I
That's
want to allow myself to do it.
okay. So that's interesting because that was the assignment I gave my guys who are in my program. We're working on rejection this month. And their assignment this past week was to get, as many no's as they can or to be creative. And some of the guys are still like, oh, this is really hard. I mean, they're noticing things. So it doesn't just suddenly change things, right? It doesn't just suddenly disappear that fear. There's some stuckness that we have to work with under there.
Yeah. The fear is still going to be there. Like, it's not going to all of a sudden change who you are, but just being again able to remove yourself from being inside of it and being
Yeah.
so stuck to the idea of I should never experience rejection and it shouldn't be a part of my life, to
Yes.
this uncomfortable thing I'm gonna have to experience.
Yeah.
And it
Right.
is
There's no way
uncomfortable.
around it.
There's no way around it. It is uncomfortable. And I'm gonna have to just kind of go through it. I'm gonna make it a goal to experience it. And I love how you said, get as many no's as possible. Yes lives in the land of no's. So the
Yes.
more
Yep.
no's that you get, the closer you are getting to that yes.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one aspect of it. The other aspect is also just, um, exposure therapy. So doing little by little at a time. So instead of
Yeah.
trying to go up and do the thing right all of a sudden, maybe just say hi to a person first
Right.
and then slowly go up the ladder till it becomes comfortable.
Yeah. I like that too, right? Breaking it down to, I mean, sometimes when I have men who are afraid of rejection, I just have them, you know, say hi or offer some kind of gift, like a compliment or an acknowledgement or something where it's like, just kind of drop it and go, right? Don't even, don't look back. Just, share something. And it doesn't even have to be a woman or a woman your age or a woman you're attracted to, but just right, get in the habit of, you know, not stopping out of that fear and
Mhm.
communicating and just being in connection with people. Because oftentimes I find there's also this that fear of rejection can shut down the normal human dynamic of,
Yeah.
hey, let's and our digital life these days where people are on their phones and aren't really talking to each other. It's less normal. We can get accustomed to just being so much more introverted or isolated.
Yeah, I agree. And I love how you said go and drop the gift, because this is a prime example of like removing that value of trying to get, because if you're
Mm,
trying to get away from rejection, that means
yeah.
that you have a certain expectation to begin with.
Mm,
So if you drop the expectation and just, oh, I'm going in, dropping a gift and
right.
leaving, then it's not as difficult to do. It's almost like if I come up to you and I tell you, go up to that person and you have to give them $100 bill.
Yeah.
It's like you're not going to have trouble doing that because you're going up to them, giving them something, right? If they don't take
Right.
it, it's like, all right, I'll just go give this $100 bill to someone else.
Yep.
So I love that you said that, because it's reframing that going away value to something that's more positive.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, it's simple, but not easy in a way.
Yeah.
And I think the not easy part often is really, you said something before about just the willingness to feel the feelings and not think it should be different, right? Like, oh, I am going to feel this internal burning or emptiness or all of those things that come with, in this case, the fear of rejection or that sense of being rejected. But
Yeah.
if you can witness it from farther out as opposed to be stuck in the middle of it, that can make a difference.
Yeah, it allows you to just not set labels that of like I have to experience, because whatever you resist is going to persist, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if you're resisting this aspect of rejection more and more, it's going to show up in your life more and more because it's your sole focus.
Right.
It's like, oh, I don't want to get rejected, so you get rejected.
Right.
I'm a huge like fan of mixed martial arts and boxing, and I
Hmm.
love seeing when guys go in there and they're playing to not lose,
Oh,
end
interesting.
up losing. It's like people who become champions and they were at the top of their game and they were fighting really hard and they become champions. They start to play it safe in every
Huh.
single fight and they end up losing. It's
Wow.
because your sole focus is no longer on winning anymore. It's on how do I not lose? And
Mm.
because you're so focused on it, it ends up happening at some point.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Okay. So, what else has been helpful for your clients around self-sabotage and around those fears of somebody not liking what you do or not, wanting something that you want?
Yeah, another thing that's been helpful on my journey and some of my clients' journey is just learning how to have self-compassion. Because oftentimes, let's go back to the rejection example. The reason why a lot of people don't want to get rejected is how they feel about themselves past the rejection.
Yep.
And so, if we can change how you feel about yourself after the rejection, then the idea of the rejection isn't that scary anymore, right? Because
Ooh.
if you feel good about yourself even after you get rejected, then
Yeah.
you're not afraid of the rejection anymore.
Oh, I
So
like that.
one thing I really love doing is a Zen mirror gazing meditation,
Mm-hmm.
where I get some of my clients to stand in front of a mirror, just completely naked, and you're looking at in your own eye,
Yeah.
and notice what thoughts come up.
Yeah.
Most of the time, the thoughts that are going to show up are going to be very similar to how your parents, teachers, guardians spoke to you
Yeah.
when you were growing up. And if you just stand there and you observe those thoughts for a long period of time, what happens is they just go away.
Mm.
Because again, whatever you don't resist will not persist. And so your thoughts are going to go away. And next thing you know, you're standing in front of the mirror feeling good about
A
yourself.
little
You're no
more
longer,
open, or at least, right? I did that exercise actually when I was in my 20s in front of many people, like probably 20 or so people standing naked in front of a mirror. And it was one of the hardest things I've done in my life. I mean, I was sobbing because at that point I could not find something that I, felt good about my body. And, um, that was an incredibly challenging exercise. And I will say, right, the freedom that comes, I mean, the freedom, first of all, in not having to even believe our minds and to realize, oh, these thoughts aren't necessarily mine. I've just absorbed them, like you said, from the people who raised me, from the culture, and then to learn to not just be a mind-based person,
right.
but to expand beyond the mind to the heart and the body and the soul, right? Then we don't have to get stuck all the time in that loop or the laundry cycle.
Yeah. You did the more intense version.
Yeah, that was
That's a lot more intense. If I mean if someone can do it in front of 20 people, then I highly urge you. I can't imagine the benefits that you get from doing something like that because your
yeah.
mind is probably going even more
Oh man.
just
Yeah.
because there's other people around you, right?
Yeah. I'm thinking of another thing I did at one point that's called White Tantra, where you actually sit and meditate in front of people for, I think it was an 8-hour day and it was a couple different people. And then just
Wow.
to get to see like, oh, what I think they're thinking about me and to watch the mind and to do it more relationally than just sitting in a silent meditation on our own. And I mean, all of these things take some effort or they take some energy or time, but otherwise we're just lost in the laundry. I love the laundry
Sure.
analogy. We're on spin cycle.
Yeah, we're on spin cycle. And And it's really helpful to be able to just accept those thoughts, and then over time you start to not experience them anymore.
Yeah.
If someone can, like, is listening to this and they do the Zen mirror gazing like every single day for the next 7 days, watch
Yeah.
how it changes your level of self-compassion towards yourself and not to judge yourself anymore. And then the rejection isn't that big anymore.
Yeah.
It's become a very small thing, because how you feel after the rejection is not going to be that terrible anymore.
Right. And I would, what I often say to my clients is like, okay, so the rejection that you feel from someone else, it's just pinging something that's already there inside of you.
Right.
Right. If it's not there and somebody says no, it's not that big of a deal. But if it's already in there. So would you also say that if someone wanted to start not naked, they could start by looking in the mirror at their face or being dressed, or, are there other steps that people can take?
Yeah, if standing in front of it naked is too uncomfortable to do, then of course just stand in
One
front of
step
the
at a
mirror.
time. Yeah.
Yeah, even if that's uncomfortable, then just take a step back and do the other exercise that I mentioned, and just write down the situation, the thoughts, the
Mm-hmm.
emotions,
Mm-hmm.
what you're trying to do to self-soothe that you shouldn't do. Um, that's a really good way of just, again, getting outside of that laundry and not just being on spin mode.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Any last tips before we complete around how to get out of self-sabotage when it's happening, or how to make it less likely that it is happening?
Yeah, I don't know if there's any tips, but I always tell people this, like, the only way to become that 2.0 version of you, or to stop the cycles of self-sabotage, addiction, habits, all of these things that you know aren't good for you, the very first step is making an intention to become that person.
Mm.
Because there's going to be a lot of people who are probably going to listen to this and be like, oh, that was some cool information, and maybe I'll try some of these things out. But you're not going to be consistent with it if it's not an intention that you've made, like, this is my goal,
Ah,
heart and soul, to actually get this done.
uh-huh.
And there's going to be a lot of bumps along the road, but if it's your only focus and your intention, you are going to get further and further. Exactly.
Right.
Just
You're
further
heading
and
toward it.
further. Exactly. So you're
Mhm.
heading towards it. It's kind of impossible to fail. But if you're just like going a little bit, backtracking, going a little bit, backtracking, you're just never going to get anywhere. So
Mhm.
intention is probably the most important thing.
Hmm. I love that. I wouldn't have thought about that. I mean, I appreciate intention and definitely use it in my life, but it's cool to hear that it actually is one of the most important things. And actually, I think about, I had an intention after I got divorced a decade ago that I wasn't going to speak in a relationship conversation. I wasn't going to speak until I could forward the conversation in a way that would be more connected, as opposed to disconnect us. And actually, that intention, I've looked back and realized that intention was so powerful that it really has created my new life and my new way of being in relationships. So yeah, intention. And then, that tendency for someone um to get stuck in whether we call it a victim mentality, or something's not possible mentality, when we keep looking at, oh, that's my intention, I don't know how it's going to happen, but that's my intention, right? What's my next step? How can I move this forward? That is really powerful.
Yeah. Brings you back to your GPS, what you need to do to get to where you're trying to go, what you value.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for doing the deep work and for guiding and supporting people to get there, or I don't know if there's a there, but to have more freedom and more love for themselves and more compassion for themselves and more capacity to have what they want in their lives.
Yeah. Thank you for giving me a voice to speak on this podcast. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, good. And where can people find more of you?
Just my name, Mo Abbasi, Moe double B double A double Si. A little bit of a mouthful on the last name. Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, wherever is comfortable for you guys.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm so glad you joined us for today's episode of Man Alive. I hope you enjoyed our conversation and it gave you something to consider and explore in your life. If you like what you heard, I'd be so grateful for you to subscribe and write a quick review that helps men like you find us. And again, head over to shanajamescoaching.com/quiz or text the word ALIVE, ALIVE, to 44144 to get a sense of how you can become a better lover and leader. You'll start to see how you can be both more respected and desired in your unique and genuine way. If you don't feel as confident or as excited about life or love as you'd like to be, this quiz is a really great starting point and will guide you toward a more passionate love life and a more inspiring and successful career. So again, text ALIVE, ALIVE, to 44144, or head over to ShaynaJamesCoaching.com/quiz. Join us each week for a new episode of Man Alive.